Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Think of me as your personal guide today, or maybe even your counselor, because we're diving into something super fascinating and honestly, deeply personal. This explainer is basically your ultimate study guide for navigating that exciting, but let's be real, sometimes totally overwhelming transition into early adulthood. We're going to unpack both the science and the strategy behind really mastering your very own inner world. So I want to ask you something right off the bat. How have you handled the stress of your newest adult responsibilities over the last 24 months? Really take a second and reflect on that. If you've been feeling this kind of weird, in-between sensation lately, where you're definitely not a dependent teenager anymore, but you also don't exactly feel like a fully established, totally autonomous adult yet, well, you're not alone. Not by a long shot. You are smack in the middle of what researchers call emerging adulthood. And man, it brings a really unique set of emotional challenges that totally require a fresh set of tools. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our structured lesson plan for today, which is modeled right on the DEPIT-ILO framework. We're going to start by welcoming you to emerging adulthood, then map out some emotional milestones. Look at self-regulation as your personal shield. Walk through a regulation roadmap, and finally, wrap up by building some real social competence. All right, part one. Welcome to emerging adulthood and the whole emotional transition of actually growing up. So the timeline of your emotional transition basically looks a little something like this. Look back at the past, right? Your adolescence was heavily marked by dependence, someone else scheduling your dentist appointments or making absolutely sure you got to class on time. But over the past 24 months, boom, you've entered emerging adulthood. It's this messy in-between phase where the pressure to figure out your career, handle shifting relationships, and take on these really heavy adult responsibilities is just, well, it's very real. Now, looking ahead, the future years of full-blown adulthood are going to demand autonomy and true independence. So what exactly is the bridge between relying on everyone else and relying on yourself? It's emotional development. Period. That is literally the single most vital task you have right now to move from those knee-jerk adolescent reactions to a healthy, self-sufficient adult identity. Moving on to section 2, mapping your emotional milestones. We really want to identify those big breakthroughs you've had in handling stress. I want you to be your own counselor for a minute. Think back to those moments over the past year where you faced a massive, stress-inducing roadblock. But instead of totally breaking down, you actually successfully navigated a change in your emotional state. The core mechanism behind those wins? Well, that brings us to our absolute anchor concept today, self-regulation. Academically speaking, it's defined as the essential life skill of managing your emotions during a change. So the crucial point here is that it's not just about taking a deep breath and calming down or stuffing your feelings in a box. It's the active, conscious management of your internal state. And get this, studies actually show that this one single skill is a greater predictor of long-term wellness than IQ. No way, right? It's the absolute anchor for your physiological health, your psychosocial identity, and your overall wellness as you take on all those heavy adult responsibilities. Which perfectly tees up section 3, self-regulation as a shield. This is all about protecting your sense of self and your evolving identity. Think about the risk factors you're facing every day. Things like extreme stress, crippling self-doubt, maybe a severe lack of resources. These are the things that make life transitions incredibly tough. And they can overwhelm you in a heartbeat. But look at how they're countered on the other side by protective factors. We're talking grit, family support, and of course, our main star today, self-regulation. When you look at this balance, you start to see that self-regulation isn't just some nice-to-have personality trait. It's a literal defense system. It actively buffers you against all those internal and external risks. I absolutely love this metaphor from the source material. It says, self-regulation acts as a polish that helps clear the clouds created by risk factors. I mean, how powerful is that image? When you're feeling totally clouded by intense social pressure or just the generalized anxiety of entering a new phase in life, polishing your inner world is exactly what brings your true self-concept back into crystal clear focus. It literally gives you the clarity you need to hold on to your identity, even when everything around you gets super murky. And this brilliantly illustrates that self-regulation doesn't just operate in a vacuum. It's part of a much larger, interconnected web of essential life skills. You've got grit, persisting through those really tough challenges. You have self-determination, which is taking charge of your own choices. There's problem solving for processing stress in a healthy way, and optimism, keeping that positive outlook alive. Think of these as your dynamic emotional toolkit. While grit might keep you putting one foot in front of the other, self-regulation ensures you actually have the emotional stability to make good, solid decisions while you do it. They just completely strengthen each other. All right, let's get practical. Section 4, the regulation roadmap activity. This is a simple 3-step guide to actually mastering your inner world. Here is your actionable game plan straight from the curriculum. Step 1, identify the stressor. Maybe it's a sudden change in your work schedule or this incredibly overwhelming group project you just got assigned. Step 2, choose the skill. Which of those essential life skills we just talked about do you need to pull out of the toolkit? Do you need optimism to totally reframe the challenge, or maybe problem solving to map out a brand new timeline? And then, step 3, collaborative regulation. This is where it gets real, because you practice with a peer. You actually communicate what's stressing you out, and they get to practice empathy by suggesting a self-regulation strategy, like, I don't know, maybe just taking a brief pause before firing off an angry response. And that leads us perfectly into section 5, building social competence together, moving from inner mastery right out to outer connection. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how directly your internal world maps onto your external world. See, when you engage in peer sharing about your milestones, you aren't just venting, you're actively practicing outer empathy. When you maintain your internal emotional control, you are directly enabling fair treatment and conflict resolution in your shifting social circles. And when you build up those strong relational skills inside, you become this incredibly effective powerhouse in collaborative work outside. You simply cannot master the outer social world and be a solid, resilient partner in a group project without first mastering your inner emotional tools. It's totally an inside-out job. So, as we wrap up this explainer, we finally arrive at the synthesis of our whole study guide. And I want to leave you with this final provocative question. What is your one self-regulation goal for the coming week to handle a specific adult responsibility? Don't just let this be some theoretical explainer you went through and then immediately forgot about. Actually, write it down, commit to just one actionable step on your journey toward full social competence and true independence. Look, you've got the timeline, you've built the protective shield, and you have the roadmap right in your hands. Now, it's time to put that polish to work. Thank you so much for joining me on The Explainer today, and I will see you next time.